Just unbelievable there. Carolyn Ryan, one of our correspondents, Kelly, joined us during that panel discussion yesterday because she lost her brother, just 43 years old, after he received the COVID vaccine. But as you heard from Dr. Naomi Wolf, again, not politically partisan whatsoever. She's voted Democrat, saying there that the government flat out lied, the CDC lied, and everybody knew how deadly this can be. Yet the Biden administration, in conjunction with social media companies, felt that it needed to bolster this narrative so much that for years, anyone who said otherwise, like Dr. Wolf, had their tweets just deleted or their accounts banned, fake news. And the new Civil Liberties Alliance is doing something about it, thank goodness. A major lawsuit in the appeals court yesterday against the Biden administration for violating the First Amendment rights of Americans. Joining us now, NCLA attorney Sheng Li and the case's plaintiff, Michael Changizi, join us live now to discuss this more. Gentlemen, thank you so much. I was having so many different emotions during that segment yesterday. I was, trying not to cry for one of our colleagues who lost her brother, and then I was angry, and I'm sure our viewers were feeling the same way because a lot of them had to decide between whether or not to pay their bills or to take this vaccine. Tell us a little bit about your case and how you're going after the Biden administration.
Well, I'll go ahead and just, Biden's administration just unapologetically, unabashedly told us that they were coordinating and working with social media and or threatening them. Jen Psaki was announcing this as of April of 2021 with much popular support. There was such collective hysteria and hatred towards the unvaccinated. It was okay to do practically anything to them. And same for anybody that was denying the seriousness of COVID or undermining the effectiveness of the interventions. The fact that they wanted to violate the First Amendment was out in the open. They were actively saying that they were doing so. And that's motivated me to start a research institute devoted to understanding free expression and the importance of it. And I hadn't really, even appreciated the full level of disinformation disinformation bureau that they had in fact set out for themselves. And that's all been uncovered through these Twitter files and so on.
Yeah, Mark was, Mark and others were basically rebutting this narrative about the lockdowns, the masks, and the vaccines. And the government came and shut them out, shut all these voices out of social media. And if the government did that, that's a clear First Amendment violation. And the government also can't do through a private company like Twitter what it otherwise can't do. That violates the First Amendment just as much. And that's what we have here when you have the White House going on TV calling Twitter and other social media companies murderers for letting voices like Mark on their platform and threatening them. And then when Twitter takes Mark off, that's not just Twitter acting, that's the government acting through Twitter, and that's unconstitutional.
So as you proceed with this case, what's the conclusion that you're seeking? And let me just make a personal note. It's heartbreaking anytime you see your brother or a loved one die from COVID, but then at the hands of a vaccine that was created supposedly to safeguard that particular person or others from dying because of the COVID complications. So what's the remedy legally and then ultimately medically?
Well, I can speak legally. I'm not, unlike Mark, I'm not a real doctor. But we're asking the court in Mark's case, but also in other cases, for example, one in Louisiana, to order the government to stop pressuring social media companies and threatening them and working together with them to silence voices just because the government disagrees with those voices. Basically, we're asking the court to enforce the First Amendment and ensure there's a freedom of marketplace of ideas on social media platforms. And that's the best way for the real truth to get out.
And that's key. You said a marketplace of ideas. And Miranda, you remember, or you'll recall, in fact, all four of us may recall that when we were going through this COVID fog of war, if you will, We were hearing all sorts of reports. And then when the vaccine was discovered, we were hearing how we had to have a rush to get this done in order to stop the rate of death that has been spiraling out of control. And so as we look back in retrospect to realize that mistakes had been made because of judgment and errors, and then the failure to have a marketplace of ideas, that's essentially what this is about, and could have saved the life of your colleague, your colleague's brother.
Yeah, Kelly, if I can be so bold, then I want you gentlemen to react to that, going to the point. Going back to what Dr. Wolf had to say, and Mark, I want you to chime in with this. She's not just suggesting like they made a mistake. She's saying they flat out lied. They knew exactly what they were doing, that Pfizer colluded. They knew that this was going on. That social media, we know from listening to the hearings, they've even admitted to that, have worked with the Biden administration to silence voices. This has been collusion in the strongest form. How many investigations did we have about Trump versus Russia? And it was all a hoax. Millions of dollars spent, time wasted. This is stuff, they flat out lied to us. Go ahead, Mark.
Yeah, let me give you an example. They often refer to that they were promoting the science and stopping misinformation. But in science, what you have is you might have, let's say, 25 labs working on one kind of problem, and they're all disagree with each other because they have their own hypothesis. And you can imagine maybe the consensus at any moment is one thing, and maybe they act on it and do some interventions. In which case, maybe sometimes they're wrong, but at least they can say all of those labs were working hard independently, and that was the consensus. But instead, if you found out that they were doing these interventions on the public, and one of those labs had been burning the labs of all of their competitors, right? So that in fact, they were all undermined, and they couldn't get their work done and get their word out, and only one of those labs, in fact, was doing it all. And maybe they even had good intent. Doesn't matter. That's evil, right? That's effectively what's going on at the societal level when a centralized authority decides that one side or all other sides of the argument shall be suppressed. That's burning the labs of all the competition. And in the context of science labs, it sounds so utterly evil and obviously evil and stupid that that's why it's a great analogy. Whereas often people have this sixth grade notion that, well, there's just the truth and the government should just only let the truth be published on social media. And actually that sounds like a good argument if you're really naive about it, right? Why should the government? But the problem is the only mechanism that we have as society to coming towards the truth, slowly moving towards the truth, is the complex, chaotic processes of free expression. That is the only mechanism that we have. Anything else subverts it. Even well-intentioned people, when it's their censorship, it's subverted.
Yeah. And last time I checked, freedom of speech, that is just, like I said earlier, this is the reason why networks like Real America's Voice exist and are growing in popularity, because people are being silenced on social media. Their fear of losing their jobs or being forced to take mandates. It's not sounding like the United States that it should be. I want to give you the last word, Sheng-Li.
No, I totally agree with Mark, and again, just want to emphasize here that this is not Twitter or Facebook or YouTube doing things on their own, which is maybe a different problem. But we have clear evidence since the Twitter files, since documents just found in discovery in other cases that show the government working hand in hand with social media companies, threatening them and cooperating with them to silence voices like Mark's, and pushing through a single narrative, which now, several years later, we found there's all kinds of holes in their narrative. And I just wonder, can some of these tragedies, regarding school masking or school closures, excessive lockdowns and all that, been avoided had the public discourse been more open from the beginning?
Yeah.
More open, more transparent is what I hear you saying.
Yeah, exactly. You mentioned the lab real quickly, Mark. How many times were people criticized for even suggesting that this virus was created in a lab in China? Remember that? You were taken off, banned for saying what many people believe was the case now. So how can people support your cause?
Right. I don't want to defend my free expression on the basis of the fact that I was true and you're not. That would suggest that, well, then they should have been censored because it turns out they were misinformation. No. The way that we get towards the truth is through the rungs. The rungs of the truth are misinformation. We climb all of these misinformation because most of the history of the literature of science, all of the stuff in libraries, they're all false. There's a half-life after we eventually realize that almost all of them are false. But we get to the truth, or nearer to the truth, by the rungs of misinformation. That's how all debate and open expression moves things forward.
Well, best of luck
So
to you
subsequently,
on
if
your
you
case,
close that
gentlemen.
discussion, I'm sorry, go ahead, Miranda. If you
No,
close
no,
that
no, go
discussion,
ahead,
though,
Kelly.
if you close that discussion, you shut down every scenario that can be discussed. Now, albeit they probably thought they were discussing all this, but if you recall the way the law was structured or the way these companies manufacture this through the mRNA, they went on to say that they wanted to be absolved from any kind of lawsuit. And they didn't want to be found responsible for anything. So you remember that was baked into it as well.
Yeah, how convenient.
Yeah. Yeah, that's right.
Exactly. Gentlemen, best of luck to you. Thank you so much. Keep us posted. And if people want to follow you, where do they go?
You can find me at, I've got a YouTube video series under my name, Mark Changizi.
And you can find us at ncla.org.
All right. Sheng Li, Mark Changizi, thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Thank you.